The sound of applause filled the hall like a roaring wave, bouncing off the gold walls and crystal chandeliers of the Grand Seoul Dome. Cameras flashed from every direction, and the dazzling light made everything look like a dream, except for Jun-ho, whose heart felt heavier than it had in years. He stood backstage, his fingers nervously tapping against the microphone he was about to hold, pretending that the tremor in his chest was just excitement. But it wasn't excitement. It was memory. It had been 14 months since he last saw her. 14 months since the text that was never answered, since the apology that never came. The silence between them had stretched so long, it had almost become comfortable, until tonight. Because tonight, for the first time since their quiet break, Yoon-ah was there too. Jun-ho had learned it by accident. A staff member had whispered it carelessly in passing, saying she was presenting an award later that night. He'd smiled politely then, but deep down, every muscle in his body had gone still. The thought of her was still a wound that never quite healed. Every award show, every interview, every red carpet he attended alone reminded him of what they had lost. Not just each other, but the rhythm of two hearts that once beat in perfect sync. He had promised himself that he wouldn't let it affect him. It was just another night, another show, another act in the endless theater of fame. But when the curtain rose and her name was announced, all the air left his lungs. Please welcome our next presenter, the elegant and talented Yoon-ah. The audience erupted in cheers, and there she was, grace wrapped in silver silk, her gown shimmering like moonlight. Her hair fell in soft curls over her shoulders, her smile poised yet distant. The kind of smile she wore when she wanted the world to think she was fine. Jun-ho had seen that smile before. He had once been the reason behind the real one. She walked to the podium, graceful as ever, the soft light reflecting against the tears he swore he'd never let show. He clapped with everyone else, but his hands felt like they were clapping for someone who no longer belonged to him. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice steady but low. "It's an honor to be here tonight." Every word from her mouth felt like it was wrapped in glass. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. She had that power, she always did, the one who could silence his thoughts with a single glance. And then it happened. Their eyes met, just for a second, maybe two, but in that glance lived 1,000 unsaid things. It was not love, not forgiveness, not even resentment. It was recognition, the quiet acknowledgement of a shared past neither could erase. Her lashes fluttered, the faintest tremor of surprise crossing her face before she looked away. He saw it, he felt it, and even in that brief flicker, the world around him seemed to blur. When his category was announced an hour later, he had almost convinced himself she wouldn't be the one handing out the trophy. But fate, it seemed, loved cruel irony. The winner for Best Actor is... There was a long pause. Her lips parted slowly. Jun-ho. The room exploded in applause, and he froze. The world became a hum. Cameras turned toward him, but his gaze stayed locked on her. She was smiling again, the kind of polite, distant smile celebrities wear when the cameras are watching, but their hearts are somewhere else. He stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked the stage as if every step were a sentence in a letter he never sent. When he reached her, their hands brushed. For a brief heartbeat, he felt it. The spark that once set everything on fire. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the trophy, for a moment too long, before she finally let go. "Congratulations," she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. "Thank you," he replied, but his voice was softer than the applause around them. It was the first word they had spoken to each other in over a year. He turned to the microphone, his acceptance speech prepared, rehearsed, safe. But as he glanced at her standing just a few feet away, something in him shifted. "I wasn't expecting this," he began. "And maybe that's why it feels real." A ripple of laughter from the audience followed, but his tone stayed grounded, serious. "In this career, we share moments with people who change us. Some leave after a scene, some stay for the whole story, and some," his eyes flickered toward her for a second, "some remain even after the credits roll." The crowd didn't notice, but she did. Her fingers tensed around the cue card she was holding. Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. When the lights dimmed and he walked off stage, she remained behind, watching him disappear into shadows. And for the first time in months, she felt the ache return, the same one she had worked so hard to bury beneath new projects and bright interviews. Later that night, at the after-party, they crossed paths again. It wasn't planned. It never was. He stood by the balcony, staring out at Seoul's nightlights, his tie loosened, the award sitting untouched beside a glass of champagne. When she walked in, he didn't turn immediately, but he felt her presence, the way you feel the change in air before rain falls. "Congratulations," she said again, softly. This time he turned. "Thanks. You said that already." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it sounds different now." He chuckled under his breath, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. Everything sounds different now. They stood in silence, the city sprawling beneath them. It was beautiful, yet painfully quiet. "You looked happy," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. She tilted her head. "Do you want to say I wasn't?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. "I don't know what I want you to say anymore." Her eyes softened. "You used to know." He smiled bitterly. "I used to know a lot of things." Another silence. Another breath they both forgot to take. Finally, she said, "Jun-ho, that message." He stopped her gently. "You don't have to explain." "But I want to," she said quickly, the words trembling. "That night I was scared. Everything felt too heavy. I thought silence would hurt less than the truth. But it didn't. It just made the noise louder." He said nothing. She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "I read your message 100 times. I just couldn't answer it." He exhaled, and his laugh came out broken. "Funny, I thought maybe you never saw it." "I saw it," she said, "every word." For a long moment, they just stood there, two people surrounded by everything they had ever wanted, yet haunted by what they had lost. Finally, he said, "I thought I moved on." "So did I." Their eyes met again, and for the first time, there was no anger, no pretense. Just two tired hearts that still remembered how to beat in the same rhythm. The music from inside grew louder, laughter echoing from the hall. Around them, the world kept spinning, oblivious, beautiful, indifferent. "Do you think we'll ever be okay?" she asked quietly. He smiled sadly. "We already are. We just don't know it yet." A soft breeze brushed past them, carrying with it the faint sound of applause from inside, as if the world were giving them one last standing ovation before the curtain fell again. She turned to leave, but before she did, she whispered, "Good night, Jun-ho." He nodded. "Good night, Yoon-ah." As she walked away, he looked at the empty glass beside his award. The champagne had gone flat, just like the noise of the crowd. But inside him, something new stirred, not forgiveness, not closure, but peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop asking why. Outside, the city lights flickered like fading memories, and for the first time since everything fell apart, he smiled. Softly, quietly, knowing that some goodbyes don't end a story. They just change its shape. Because in the world they came from, love didn't always survive the script. But memories did, and sometimes that was enough. The party had thinned out, but the music still pulsed faintly through the walls, a slow jazz tune that no one was really listening to. The afterglow of the ceremony had begun to fade. Sequins lost their sparkle, the laughter of stars turned into polite goodbyes, and the scent of champagne clung to the air like memory. Jun-ho remained where she had left him, at the edge of the balcony, staring into the city lights. Seoul at night was always breathtaking, but tonight it looked like a painting he had seen too many times. Beautiful, familiar, and a little too far away. He still felt the warmth of her hand when she gave him the award. The brief brush of her skin had ignited something long buried. For a man who spent his career pretending, it was the first real emotion he'd felt in months. Behind him, the door creaked open. Soft heels clicked against marble. He didn't turn, not right away. He knew it was her before she said a word. Some things didn't need confirmation. "Still avoiding the crowd?" she asked, her voice quiet, hesitant, like she wasn't sure she had the right to be there. He smiled faintly. "I'm not good at pretending anymore." "Since when?" He turned then, meeting her gaze. "Since you stopped answering." There was no anger in his voice, just exhaustion, The kind that only comes from waiting too long for something that never arrives. She looked away, the light from the chandelier catching the shimmer of her silver gown. I didn't think you'd still care. He let out a low laugh. That's the problem, Yoon-ah. I never stopped. Silence. It was the same kind that had once sat between them in long car rides after rehearsals, comfortable, familiar, and now painfully distant. She took a small step closer. You look different on stage tonight. Older, he teased lightly. No, she said. Just quieter, like you were speaking to someone who wasn't there. He glanced at her, then at the skyline again. Maybe I was. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She just stood there, letting the weight of what he said fill the space between them. Do you ever think about it? He asked softly. About what? That night, the message, the silence that came after. She closed her eyes briefly. Every day. When she opened them again, her eyes were glistening. I used to write replies I never sent. 100 versions. Apologies that never sounded enough. Explanations that felt too late. Jun-ho exhaled slowly. And still nothing. Her voice cracked a little. Because I was scared. Jun-ho, you know how this world works. Rumors, headlines, stories that twist everything. I thought walking away quietly would protect you. He turned to face her fully, his expression raw. Protect me? You left me in the middle of the storm and called it protection. The words hung in the air like thunder. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. But instead, she took a slow breath and steadied herself. I thought time would help us forget. Time doesn't heal everything, he said. Sometimes it just teaches you how to hide it better. The wind picked up, carrying the faint hum of laughter from inside. It was strange. The world was still celebrating, but for them, it felt like everything had stopped. She took another step closer, close enough for him to see the faint tremble in her lips. When I saw your name tonight, I almost didn't go on stage. He raised a brow. Why? Because I knew the second I looked at you, it would all come back. He swallowed. Did it? Her eyes met his, and the answer was in her silence. Yes, it had all come back. The long nights of rehearsals, the late-night drives through Han River, the quiet conversations in empty studios where dreams and fears intertwined. It wasn't fame that bound them. It was understanding. And losing that had been the cruelest part. He stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of her presence. You still wear the perfume, he said quietly. She blinked. What? The same one you used to. Jasmine and rain. He gave a faint smile. I used to tell you it smelled like spring. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. You still remember that? I remember everything. The music inside shifted to something slower, deeper. The kind of melody that made memories resurface. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, two ghosts haunting a balcony dressed in gold light. Then she said, If you could go back, would you do it all again? He thought for a long moment. Yes, he said finally, even knowing it would end this way. Her breath caught. Why? Because for a while, he said, you made everything feel real, and I'd rather live with the pain of losing that than never feel it all. Her tears fell freely now, glimmering under the lights. You were always better with words, she whispered. He shook his head gently. Not really. I just never stopped meaning them. Another pause. Another breath that lingered between them. Then, from somewhere inside, the host's voice echoed faintly, calling stars for a group photo. It broke the moment like a stone through glass. She straightened, wiping her tears quickly before they could leave marks on her makeup. They'll notice I'm gone, she said quietly. He nodded, eyes soft but unreadable. Yeah, you should go. She hesitated. Will you? He looked past her, toward the crowd and the endless flash of cameras. No, not yet. She turned to leave, her heels echoing softly against the marble, but halfway to the door, she stopped. Without turning back, she said, For what it's worth, I'm sorry. He smiled sadly to himself. That's what I was waiting to hear. The door closed gently behind her, and he was alone again. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was full of everything they'd said and everything they couldn't. He looked down at the awards sitting on the table beside him. The medal gleamed under the city lights, but all he could think about was the warmth of her hand when she passed it to him. The applause from earlier still echoed faintly in his ears, but it wasn't the sound of victory anymore. It was the sound of goodbye. And yet, somewhere deep inside, beneath all the pain and memory, there was a flicker of peace. Because sometimes closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from finally hearing the silence and realizing it no longer hurts. He took one last look at the city, exhaled, and whispered to himself, maybe that's enough.